Most veterans never even see it coming. You spend years serving your country, pushing through pain, injuries, trauma, only to come home and fight a brand new battle, the VA system. You file your claim. You submit your paperwork. Maybe you even get a doctor to back you up. But somewhere in that pile of forms is one line, a code, just a few digits. And if that one number is wrong, your entire case can fall apart before you even realize what happened. Your benefits? Denied. Your rating? Slashed. And the worst part? No one tells you why. This isn't about missing documents or lazy reviewers. This is something far more subtle and far more dangerous. It's the hidden language inside your claim. A language most veterans don't even know exists, but one the VA uses to decide everything. How much they'll pay you, how seriously they'll treat you, and in some cases, whether they treat you at all. This number isn't just data. It's a story the VA tells about your condition. And if that story doesn't match your reality, good luck fixing it. Because once the wrong code is in your file, the system doesn't question it, and neither will anyone else. If you've ever felt like your disability claim didn't reflect what you're really going through, if you've ever wondered why your benefits seem lower than they should be, or if you just want to make sure you're not getting quietly shortchanged, this is the video you need to see. Because today, we're exposing the hidden danger behind VA diagnosis codes and why getting just one of them wrong could quietly destroy your entire case. Let's get into it. Most veterans think the VA decides their disability rating based on their symptoms or how bad their condition actually is. But that's not how it works. What really determines your case behind the scenes is a diagnosis code, just a string of numbers tied to a condition. But that code isn't just for medical use, it's legal. Once it's entered into your records, it becomes the official story of what you're dealing with, whether it's accurate or not. This number controls everything. It tells the VA what your condition is, how serious it's supposed to be, how it should be rated, and even what treatments you qualify for. And yet, most veterans have never even heard of it. You won't find it explained in your claim approval letter. No one walks you through it after your exam. But behind every decision, every percentage rating, every benefit approval or denial, that code is quietly shaping the outcome. And the system treats it like fact, not an opinion, not something to double check. If the wrong code ends up in your file, if a condition is labeled as something less severe or completely different, the VA acts on that version of the story, not yours. They follow the number, not the pain you live with every day, not your service record, not your real experience. This is why so many veterans walk away confused. They know their life has changed. They know their condition affects everything they do, but they get a 10% rating or a flat denial, and the explanation doesn't make sense. It's not because the VA thinks you're lying. It's because the diagnosis code they use is designed, sometimes by accident, to keep your case in the lowest possible tier. And here's what stings. Once that low value code is in your file, it becomes the benchmark. Every future evaluation compares you to that initial classification. So even if your condition gets worse, the rating might not go up because the system is still measuring the wrong thing. So if you're wondering why your rating doesn't reflect what you're going through, don't just look at your symptoms. Look at the code. Because sometimes that one word or number is a difference between fair compensation and a silent denial that no one explains. Most veterans assume that whatever diagnosis shows up on their paperwork came straight from their doctor. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the person assigning that diagnosis code isn't a doctor at all. In the VA system, claims processors, people with no medical license, often play a role in translating exam notes into official codes. And when they get it wrong, the fallout lands on you. Let's break it down. After your CMP exam, the provider might write a narrative summary describing your symptoms, background, and any findings. But unless that report clearly spells out a specific diagnosis and ties it to a VA-approved code, someone in the chain has to interpret it. That might be a rater, a data entry specialist, or even a contractor. And here's the kicker. They're on a deadline. They're processing hundreds of claims. And in some cases, they're just scanning for keywords and matching them to whatever code looks close enough. Imagine going through a 45-minute mental health exam, laying out years of trauma, and finally being heard. But then the rater sees depressed mood and not major depressive disorder, and your condition gets logged under a code that barely qualifies for compensation. Now your reality has been reduced to a technical shortcut, and you won't even know it unless you dig through your records with a fine-tooth comb. Even physical conditions get misfiled this way. Joint pain gets labeled as a temporary sprain. A degenerative disc condition gets listed as a mild strain. In one keystroke, your long-term disability becomes a short-term issue, one the VA might decide is already resolved. And because this isn't a direct decision made by your doctor, you don't get an explanation. The VA won't send a letter that says, "Hey, we had to guess at your diagnosis code. Hope that's okay." They just process it and move on. So now you're sitting there with a denial or a lower rating, wondering what went wrong. Meanwhile, the code sitting on your claim is quietly working against you, inserted by someone who never saw you, never heard your story, and never asked a single question. That's what makes this so dangerous. Because when the wrong code doesn't come from a doctor, you can't fix it with a new prescription or medical opinion. You have to challenge the entire decision process. And most veterans don't even know where to start. Here's the part that feels the most unfair. The VA isn't going to catch the mistake for you, even if the code is wrong, even if it doesn't match your symptoms, even if it leads to a denial that costs you thousands. To them, the paperwork is correct unless you prove otherwise, and the burden to fix it, that falls squarely on your shoulders. Think about that. You're injured, you're struggling, you're trusting the system to do its job, and instead, it quietly loads your case with the wrong information. Then, when the decision comes back and doesn't reflect your reality, they don't explain it. They just expect you to figure out what went wrong and then fight to correct it. Most veterans don't even know this is happening. They assume the VA knows what they're doing. They assume that if something looks off, someone will fix it, but that's not how it works. If your diagnosis code doesn't line up with your symptoms, if your condition is underlabeled, misclassified, or completely missed, no one in the system is going to flag it. The VA isn't scanning your file looking for errors. They're processing data, fast, and once it's entered, it becomes the truth unless you say otherwise. And here's the hard reality. Most veterans aren't trained to read their own files. They don't know how to decode a DBQ, dissect a CNP report, or even find the diagnosis code that was used. It's not written in plain English. It's buried in a sea of bureaucratic language. And if you don't know what to look for, you'll never spot the mistake. That's why so many vets end up frustrated, confused, and stuck. They think they did everything right. They told the truth. They showed up to their appointments. They submitted their evidence. But their claim still got denied or rated way lower than it should have. And no one ever told them the problem was hiding in a string of numbers behind the scenes. This is why having help matters. Whether it's a VSO, an accredited advocate, or a good attorney. You need someone who understands the system, someone who can read your file like a second language, and someone who can challenge the VA when things don't add up. Because the system isn't built to protect you. It's built to process you. And unless you fight back, a quiet coding error could cost you years of benefits, and no one will ever tell you why. Most people assume the worst part of a wrong diagnosis code is lost compensation. But here's what no one talks about. When the VA gets the code wrong, your treatment can suffer too. And in some cases, that could be far more damaging than a lower disability rating. Everything in the VA system is connected. Your medical care, your prescriptions, your therapy, even your eligibility for certain programs, all runs through the lens of your diagnosis code. If the code says your condition is mild, the system assumes you don't need aggressive care. If the code suggests your symptoms are temporary, they may deny long-term treatment plans. If the code isn't linked properly to your service, your condition might not even be treated as connected at all. Let's say you're dealing with chronic back pain caused by an injury from active duty. But instead of coding it as degenerative disc disease or nerve compression, your file gets labeled as a simple back strain. Now, instead of exploring MRI scans, pain management, or surgical options, the VA might offer you basic physical therapy and over-the-counter meds. You're stuck in a loop of inadequate care, not because the doctors don't care, but because the system thinks you're not that injured. This is especially dangerous with mental health. PTSD, major depression, or trauma-related anxiety often get misclassified as adjustment disorder or mood issues. And when that happens, the medications offered may be too weak, the therapy limited, or worse, the treatment denied entirely. You might feel like no one's taking your pain seriously, and in a way, they aren't. They're responding to a version of your diagnosis that was never accurate to begin with. The worst part? You may not even know the care you're missing. If a specialist doesn't see the right code in your file, they won't recommend certain procedures. If your condition isn't classified correctly, you might not qualify for certain pain programs, mental health services, or referrals to outside providers. The wrong code becomes a locked door, and every time you try to get help, you're told, "We can't do that based on your diagnosis." And the longer it goes on, the more damage it does. Your condition may get worse. Your frustration builds. You start to believe maybe this is just what you have to live with. But it's not. The problem isn't just your body. It's a system misunderstanding your condition from the very beginning. This is why catching a wrong code early isn't just about money. It's about protecting your future health. Because if the system keeps treating the wrong condition, you'll never get the care you actually need. It's strange how something so small, just a line of numbers in a file, can change the entire direction of your life. Not because you lied or failed to show up or didn't have the proof, but because the system quietly misread your reality and never told you it got it wrong. For many veterans, the wrong diagnosis code is the invisible reason behind years of frustration, behind denied claims, behind limited treatment, behind the feeling that no one believes how much you're really struggling. And the hardest part is, you might never have known. You trusted the process. You followed every rule. But the system doesn't run on truth. It runs on data. And if that data isn't accurate, neither is your outcome. But here's what you need to remember. This isn't just happening to you, and it's not too late to push back. You have the right to read your own records. You have the right to challenge errors. You have the right to demand that your story, your real story, is what gets written into your file. So ask questions. Request your DBQs. Review your exam notes. Get a second opinion. And if something feels off, don't ignore it. Because that single number, that one piece of code, might be the reason your case hasn't been taken seriously. And until you fix it, nothing else will move forward. You've fought harder battles than this. Don't let a silent mistake define your future. If you learned something valuable today, drop a comment below and tell us what stood out to you most. Or what part of your claim experience has frustrated you the most. Your story could be the one that helps someone else avoid the same mistake. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. We've got more videos coming that break down exactly how to navigate the VA system and how to fight for the care and compensation you've already earned. Thanks for being here. And most of all, thank you for your service.